When people are really struggling to pay their bills, to heat their homes, the entire political ground can shift right under their feet. It's a pattern we're seeing all across Europe. But today, we're zeroing in on a really dramatic example, the Czech Republic. We're going to look at how a crippling energy crisis there created a perfect opening for a powerful new populist voice, one that is completely changing the nation's direction. And this whole story really kicked into high gear with a headline that sent shockwaves across the continent. And look, we're not just talking about some minor political spat here. This became a full-blown diplomatic firestorm, and it gets right to the heart of the huge changes that are happening in Prague. And at the center of it all, one man, the new speaker of the Czech Chamber of Deputies. His rise to power, and maybe more importantly, what he chose to do with it, well, that's the story of a country at a massive turning point. So, in his New Year's address, this man, Tomio Okamura, made his position crystal clear. I mean, he didn't just question his country's foreign policy, he flat out attacked it, using language that caused immediate outrage, not just from Ukraine, but from opposition parties right there at home. So you have to ask, right? How on earth did a leader with views so different from the mainstream get elected to one of the highest offices in the entire country? Well, to understand how this happened, you really have to rewind and look at the immense economic pressure that everyday Czech people were under, because for so many, this wasn't just about politics, it was about survival. The country was just hammered by a staggering 17% annual inflation rate. Think about that for a second. That was one of the highest in the entire European Union, and it was all fueled by this massive energy crisis that exploded after the country decided to move away from Russian gas. That 17%, that's not just a number. That's the cost of everything, from food to fuel to shooting through the roof. And again, this wasn't some abstract economic statistic. This was a crisis people felt deep in their homes. It's the story of people like Vera, a single mom who, no matter how hard she worked, was pushed into social housing because her paycheck just couldn't keep up with her bills anymore. And for the most vulnerable, people like pensioners living on a fixed income, it became this terrifying choice between heating their homes and putting food on the table. The fear of that next heating bill, it was a constant daily anxiety. And it wasn't just individuals. Businesses were pushed right to the brink. I mean, take this 300-year-old glass factory, a real symbol of Czech craftsmanship. In just 1 year, their energy costs went from 10% of their total budget to a completely unsustainable 50%. Their gas bills were 10 times higher than the year before. We're talking about a historic business, hundreds of jobs suddenly on the verge of just disappearing. So you've got this widespread pain, this anger, this desperation, and all of that together created this huge political vacuum. People were blaming the government's policies for the crisis, and into that void stepped one person with a simple, direct, and really powerful message. And that person was Tomio Okamura. He's a political outsider with a mixed Japanese and Czech background, and he positioned himself as the ultimate anti-establishment figure. He just tapped right into that deep public discontent. And his platform? It was a direct answer to the crisis. He blamed the EU, he blamed NATO. He said, let's go back to getting cheap Russian gas. And he tied it all together with this nationalist message that was against immigration and against sending aid to Ukraine. Now, for people who felt left behind and broke, this was a very clear, even if it was a very controversial, alternative. And wow, did that message work. It was incredibly effective. It basically took all of that public anger and converted it into real, actual political power. And in the process, it shook up the entire Czech political system. Okamura's rise was fast. He gets into the Senate in 2012, founds his own party just a few years later, and then the big one. In November 2025, he's elected speaker, one of the most powerful jobs in the government. And believe me, he did not waste any time using that new power to challenge the status quo. Now, his new position comes with a really powerful tool, parliamentary immunity. The whole idea is to protect politicians so they can speak freely about their political views without being prosecuted for it. But here's the controversy. Critics are arguing that it's being misused as a shield to get away with actual crimes like fraud or inciting hatred, which could effectively put some politicians completely above the law. So, here's the crucial point. All of these things, the economic pain, the populist surge, the fight over immunity, they've all brought the Czech Republic to this fundamental conflict, this crossroads over its own future.
On one side of that crossroads, you have the official government policy from just over a year ago, right? A proud, strategic move away from Russia, which was celebrated as this huge step toward energy security and independence.
And then, on the other side, just a little over a year later, you get a completely opposite vision from one of the country's most powerful new leaders. This isn't just a small policy disagreement. This is a battle for the soul of the country's foreign policy and its economic future. And this clash leaves the entire nation, and really all of its European partners, facing a deeply uncertain future. The answer to this question is going to define the Czech Republic for years. It's just a powerful reminder of how quickly the ground can shift when people feel they aren't being heard, and how an energy crisis can do a whole lot more than just raise your bills. It can literally reshape a nation's destiny.